We almost took advantage of this horrible thing that we're all experiencing to learn to think like a scientist.
I have to be efficient and I have to make each day count.
People want to utilize a business that is a different race and ethnicity.
Today on Spotlight, supporting Black-owned businesses thanks to a website launched by a St. Louis activist. Plus, a summer internship that'll now include COVID-19 research. And then an author's coming-of-age novel about an average kid named Love. But first, enjoy the 442s at the Sheldon Concert Hall from the recent Arts United STL event. It's Sunday and you're watching Spotlight.
Wake up everybody, no more sleeping in bed, no more backwards thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up all you teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what we have to say. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is still so much hatred, war and poverty. The world won't get no better, no better, if we just let it be. Na 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 na. You know the world won't get no better. We've got to change the world, just you and me. Wake up all you doctors, treat the old people well, 'cause they're the ones who suffer and catch all the hell. They don't have to very long for the judgment day. Won't you make them happy before they pass away? Wake up everybody, no more sleeping in bed, no more backwards thinking, it's time to think ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. We've still got all this hatred, war, sickness, and poverty. You know the world won't get no better, no, 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 if we just let it be. Change the world, you and me. and change the world with love. Wake up and change the world with love. Wake up and change the world with love.
Follow HEC Media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Byron Hayes is a man on a mission. He wants to uplift people. It may be through the food he makes or through another one of his passions, basketball. Hoopin' for Hearts is his wellness initiative and basketball league in St. Louis for men.
Testing our blood pressure and getting it detected early.
Moving Upward is Byron's nonprofit designed to provide housing for homeless veterans. This is his way of giving back to a community who supports him. As a business owner on Dr. Martin Luther King Drive in St. Louis, that's important to Byron. He owns JoJo's Fish and Chicken.
We really specialize in fried fish, but lately we've been getting known for our shrimp. People are calling in and coming in and asking, is this the place that sells the big shrimp?
JoJo's Fish and Chicken is one of many Black-owned businesses in the St. Louis area featured on the website For the Culture STL. Ohan Ashe is the creator. When Byron found out about the website, he didn't hesitate, knowing firsthand how important it is to help one another.
We need something like For the Culture where it's a lot of young businesses and more established businesses, a one-stop shop, if you will.
Ohan was inspired to launch the site after the Ferguson protests.
I was heavily active in the Ferguson protest and the Jason Stockley protest, organizing to media, to making the flyers. Once those started dying down a little bit, I had this desire to uplift Black-owned businesses.
She wanted to provide one place that will link people to Black-owned businesses where they live or visit.
We have been seen in every single state. We have been seen in all 7 continents.
With the growing desire to support Black-owned businesses, Ohan wants to expand
into other cities, other states. People are really excited to even be a part of this coalition of beautiful support in the Black community.
People who may not even know about us, if they subscribe to For the Culture or they support it, they'll see us in there. Hopefully they'll get interested in what we offer and come pay us a visit.
Later on Spotlight, a glass artist inspired by nature.
The University of Missouri St. Louis CLIMB, Collaborative Laboratory Internships and Mentoring Blueprint, offers a 6-week paid summer internship for select high school students from North St. Louis. 14 students from Jennings High School and University City High School were chosen to work with faculty members and participate in research experiences across a variety of disciplines.
Every year since the beginning, they've been having authentic research experiences. This is not a class, right? This is a get your hands dirty kind of experience.
You got the opportunity to take it because it's a good experience and it just opens your eyes.
This innovative program began in 2015 to offer talented, disadvantaged high school students the opportunity to explore potential career paths that they may not have considered.
This experience can really help you grow as a person, considering that we don't have many resources.
This is a nationwide issue, right? When you think about these college goers that are first generation, we know that there is an issue there, that they lack support. We also know that the data shows that they don't finish, but yet nobody has done anything necessarily to figure out what can we do to better support them. And so it could be starting at the high school level.
It's not about the zip code. It's about how you view children and what you see in children that they do not see in themselves.
In 2017, the UMSL graduate students launched the JUMP program to provide an ongoing different kind of mentoring to the high school students.
This group of biology graduate students once a month takes groups of students from Jennings. They take them to places where they almost certainly wouldn't go. And through that process of engagement, you can see it opening their world with these people from all over the world who don't sound like them, that science is in everything.
What is a coronavirus? A coronavirus is a respiratory virus which spreads primarily through job.
Due to the pandemic, the 2020 Climb Summer Internship Program is a virtual experience focused on investigating COVID-19.
So the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, threw us for a loop because the announcement came out in March that there would be no face-to-face activities on UMSL campus in the summer. We wanted to look for ways to engage them through the summer and in a way that almost took advantage of this horrible thing that we're all experiencing, to use that as a platform to learn to think like a scientist. The first step in science is to generate hypotheses. And as we met and we identified these 4 teams, the first team is starting at the foundation level. What is a virus and how does it differ from bacteria and what specifically is a coronavirus? And then the second team is saying, why is this pandemic different from anything else any of us has experienced in our lifetimes? Different from HIV? Why is it different from the previous SARS epidemic? How is it different from Ebola and the Spanish influenza?
Basically, polio was going a little bit at the same rate as coronavirus. If you do the math with the population that was back then and the rate it was moving just actually a tad bit faster than how we were. And then
teams 3 and 4 are focusing on different aspects of the question of the impact of COVID-19 on their community. Why is the infection rate and the death rate so much higher in African Americans in St. Louis?
If COVID-19 is indiscriminate, are there economical or cultural reasons that might explain the higher infection and death rates in African Americans? And the reason we want to know is because African Americans only make up about 10 to 30% of each state's population, but our death rates have become way higher than any other minority in the, areas where we live at. So
the second set of questions that Team 4 is focusing on is more based on economics.
So the main factors that we're looking at are the low income, the need to work, lack of information, loss of jobs, and racism. So we each divide.
As this virtual meeting wraps up, the work continues for the interns.
By the end of the 6-week period, we have a closing presentation where each of them gives a formal presentation about their experience.
For Dr. Patricia Parker, she never forgets an intern, and every student has potential.
This has been a really satisfying experience to get to know these great kids. They are amazing, and what they can do is amazing, and they're going to go on and do great things.
Go to HECmedia.org for the arts and authors.
Completely accidental because I never set out to write a book.
Science and history, culture and community.
It's considered to be the oldest organic farm west of the Mississippi.
Education, films.
Finding the coin places the site firmly in the 13th century.
What's happening now around St. Louis and more. See for yourself at HECmedia.org.
In Everywhere You Don't Belong, a young boy becomes a young man on Chicago's South Side. But even though the star of Gabriel Bump's debut novel is Claude McKay Love, his life is shaped by the people who love him and the people who leave him.
I thought that, a character like Claude was something I wasn't seeing a lot of in popular culture, and was a character that I thought could be interesting. He's this exceptionally kind and sweet kid. I think he's exceptionally empathetic.
In a recent essay, Bump calls that place the spectacular average, the middle ground that gets overlooked and undervalued when headlines define your home. Bump saw that firsthand as a young man growing up in Chicago's Highlands neighborhood, where the novel is set. The Highlands is filled with beautiful, historic homes, but in the novel, when police kill a young boy who is feeding his neighbor's cats, it becomes consumed by violence.
I feel, and have always felt that way, right, about South Shore, that it is not only misunderstood, but misunderstood in this kind of grotesque way.
Bump spent 8 years turning Claude's story into Everywhere You Don't Belong. Now he's navigating the life of a new novelist, like seeing his book reviewed in the New York Times and meeting the fans who love it.
The story's told through the eyes of Claude McKay, who, one of the things that a lot of reviews have pointed out and that you've talked a lot about, and which I really liked as a reader too, is he's not special in any other way that people look for kids to be special, especially coming from, as you said, to like a rough area. He's just a kid who's just trying to find his way.
He comes from a stable family, right? Like he doesn't have total like economic pressure to behave a certain way. I think that's something that might be a little lost when maybe even when I talk about the book, but when the book is read, is that a big part of this is like Claude having the solid like economic and familial like grounding underneath him, where he's allowed to just be an average kid, right? And how can he do that and be happy, right? When society might not want him to be. And I think that what made me want to write about a character like Claude is because when I was in high school, there was something interesting happening in Chicago from like my point of view, right? I felt like Chicago was being portrayed on like a national scale in these like two extremes, kind of what I was talking about like earlier. Right? Like on one extreme, this was when like Barack Obama was running for president, and we had like Michelle Obama right on this side, like even like taking charge in a lot of ways. And she spent most of her childhood on Euclid Avenue, right south of me. And then on the other side of the spectrum, like I talked about earlier, this was when violence was really spiking in Chicago, particularly South Shore. Right, there was hundreds, a cascade of murders and violent crimes, right, and mostly involving young men, right, like mostly involving kids that were my age in high school, just getting killed for nothing. And I thought that like inspecting kind of the middle ground, like the average, where Claude was more how I felt like in all this. Like I didn't view myself as an exceptional teenager, right? Like I didn't have to like settle into a life of crime, right? And I feel like there were a lot of kids like me, and that was probably the initial impulse where I thought that a character like Claude was something I wasn't seeing a lot of in popular culture, and was a character that I thought could be interesting, and I think like turned out interesting, right? Because even if he's not exceptional in traditional ways, I think he's like exceptional in ways that society might not value as much as they should. Like he's this exceptionally kind and sweet kid, right? Like he's exceptionally empathetic, and those those qualities drove me towards Claude, and I think drive the book. I would like people to just like Claude, and I hope that they would do that no matter where they lived, like what color their skin was.
Gabriel Bump, thank you so much for talking with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was really nice.
Text BUMP to 31996 to watch the full interview or download our Talking with Authors podcast.
HEC Media presents Talking with Authors, the podcast. Your favorite writers and genres, with diverse subjects and styles, with new podcasts dropping bi-weekly. Subscribe to Talking with Authors wherever you get your podcasts.
At the Missouri History Museum, we have Mighty Mississippi, which is an exhibit that takes in a long history of our life in this region, where the Middle Mississippi River is vital to cities like St. Louis, and has been a large part of why people have settled in this region and why it's going to be so important for our future. We're looking at a long view of the Mississippi River and what it means for us today. So there are over 200 artifacts in this exhibit. Some of them have never been on display before. Many of them haven't been on display in decades. So this is an opportunity for people to come and experience a deep history of our relationship with the river. People need to know how important this place is. This is where the fur trade started in the middle of North America at St. Louis. This is where Native Americans lived for centuries. 1,000 years ago, the Mississippian people started their communities here at Cahokia and on this side of the Mississippi River in Missouri. This is an enormous exhibit. We have so many important objects. From the fur trade era, we have a really important kind of gun. It was a type of gun traded for almost 200 years. It's called a Northwest gun. So this was traded to the Native Americans. It was made in Europe. It was brought here and then traded out of the Fur Trade Center of St. Louis. So there are also amazing objects from the steamboat era. There's a beautiful bell from a steamboat called the Elvira that was built in 1851. It weighs 600 to 700 pounds. We also have the pilot house of the Golden Eagle, which was a steamboat that plied the Mississippi River and many of the other large western rivers. That steamboat was the last of its kind. It was a wooden-hulled packet boat that was based out of St. Louis. Originally was built for the packet trade down to New Orleans and Natchez, and was acquired in 1918 by a St. Louis company called the Eagle Packet Company, and they rechristened it the Golden Eagle. And they used that boat until it was sank in 1947. The pilot house remained dry, it was salvaged, and we eventually got it into our collection. That's a big artifact. It's the largest one in this exhibit. It's about 13 foot square and about 17 feet high. This object, the Golden Eagle Pilot House, is one of the largest in the Missouri Historical Society's collection. There are maybe only two other objects quite as large, one of them being the copy of Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis airplane, which hangs in our loggia outside this gallery. There are also objects like 3 plummets on display. These objects were used probably about 5,000 years ago by the people who came to this area before the Mississippian people. So the Native Americans living and working around the river systems were using these as some kind of a tool. It's a wonderfully designed exhibit that really gives you a sense of the Mississippian period culture. It gives you a great sense of the industrial era when steamboats ruled the day. There are all sorts of other interactives and experiences that people can have to understand more about the relationship with the river.
The Mighty Mississippi exhibit is open now through April 2021. Follow HEC Media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I was always a maker of things. I was always interested in making things out of wood or metal or leather or whatever. When I discovered glass, I guess I was just fascinated by it immediately and fell in love with it. I started blowing glass in St. Louis at Washington University in about 1981, and I was interested in having my own studio. Found this old building here in Augusta and started building furnaces. I'm Sam Stang, and this is Kaiko Maihata, and we're standing in our gallery here in Augusta, Missouri. We're both glass makers. My work is known for clean forms and bright colors and bold patterns, often intricate patterns interspersed with bold patterns. Very fine detail often. The application of color and pattern probably come from things I've seen in nature. It can come from almost anywhere for me. I tend to use really vibrant, bright colors. A lot of other glass artists use more muted colors, more earthy colors, or more tones. And I tend towards primary and secondary colors because it's what I really love, you know. We're going to try to make the bottom of this thing be a sharp corner. So Kaya is going to paddle and Miles is going to blow very lightly. Go ahead, everybody. Press harder. Press harder. Stop. The early days of American studio glass were basically a lot of free form, dripping glass around and calling it sculpture. And I wasn't really interested in that, and I didn't really have a great deal of respect for a lot of that work. What I was interested in was more the work that was being done in Italy, in Sweden, Scandinavia, which was designed by designers and made by master craftsmen. My interest was to be a designer and master craftsman all rolled into one, which is what I've been trying to achieve. Glass is a unique material because it has no form. So what I start with is a pot of molten glass, which is like honey. Well, in many ways, it's different from a woodworker or a metalworker who starts with a form and then has to remove material. And I have to enlarge it by blowing into it and shape it. But the material itself doesn't want to be symmetrical necessarily. It's trying to be asymmetrical. This technique, this is called reticello, and it's basically a net pattern. And when I do shows, and whenever I have customers come in and see this, most people can't believe that this could possibly be made by hand, this technique. And I have to say this was developed in probably the 1600s in Italy, again in white and clear. And it's one of the most complex patterns to make. Having a glass shop, glass studio, is very different from any other sort of art or craft studio that I can think of because it's so expensive to produce. My gas bill alone is enormous and my materials are enormous, but the majority of the work that you see in there, I'd say almost all of it, are things that I wanted to make, that I'm interested in, and that I'm not too worried about having to sell them because that seems to take care of itself. I have to be efficient and I have to make each day count. So I am forced to think about, at the end of the day, did I produce enough to make it all worthwhile? So I am forced to make things that fit in a price range. I actually find that to be a challenge, and that's a design challenge as well. What can I make that somebody who's not wealthy can afford, and it's still beautiful and it's still something they'd want to own? Fortunate in that so far people have bought what I like and what I want to make.
Meet more St. Louis Art Fair artists at stlfair.com. This year's virtual fair will take place at stlouisartfair.com. Thanks for watching Spotlight. You can watch all of these stories and more at hecmedia.org. Set your DVR for next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.